You know you're gonna be unsettled and upset if you watch this movie and decided to respect your boundaries, and I respect you for it. But I know curiosity is a rush, and since I don't respect my boundaries, I'm here to scratch your itch. My mission is to tell you exactly what happens in a Serbian film without freaking you out and decipher what the film was trying to say underneath all the horror. There won't be any explicit images or terms in this video, as I did my best to keep it PG to explain and show things in the friendliest way possible, but still, even if using euphemisms, this video contains upsetting topics about extreme instances of sexual, physical, and psychological violence. I'm talking bottom of the barrel depravity. If there's something you know you might be upset about, I strongly encourage you to check something else on the channel. So I'm letting you know, 1, the kind of content that will be present in the video, and 2, that I am not responsible for your choice to continue to watch it. Alright, let's go. A Serbian Film is a 2010 exploitation horror film from Serbia. Thank you for watching. A Serbian film caused controversy as soon as it first hit the art film circuit. It was banned in countries like Spain, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Norway, and even temporarily in Brazil. In the UK, it had to be cut down by 6 minutes just to get released, while in the US, it earned an NC-17 rating, though it later got an uncut version. The film even set a record in the US for needing 19 minutes of footage cut to avoid harsher censorship, and it was investigated in Serbia to make sure no actual crimes were committed during filming. To this day, many still consider it the most disturbing movie ever made. The film starts with a man and a woman leaving a club called Lit Club Filth, which says a lot about what kind of club it is, and they start doing the deed. The camera then cuts to a child, a little boy, and we realize that not only the scene of the man and the woman is part of an adult film called Miloš the Filthy Stud, but the boy is watching said adult film. The boy keeps on watching the film until Miloš, the actor in the film, walks into the living room with a woman and she turns the TV off, letting us know that he is the boy's father, and the woman, Maria, is the boy's mother. The boy's called Peter, by the way. Miloš is pretty dismissive about the whole thing, saying that he saw his first adult film when he was the boy's age. Miloš says to his wife, Maria, that a woman named Layla called him, and that's why he dug up all his old films, explaining how the kid found it. Maria and Peter leave the room, and we hear the kid ask his mom what his dad was doing in the film. Miloš turns the TV back on, watching the scene, squeezing the DVD case, and then later staring at his adult film collection, almost like he misses it. Miloš retired from the adult actor life early, but he doesn't have a whole lot of money left to stay away from that life for too long. So he meets up with the Layla woman, and she starts saying how good he was at his job, calls him an artist. My guy is a Daniel Day-Lewis of the Serbian adult film industry. And then she goes on to say that there is this visionary director called Vukmir who wants to create artistic adult films shot in Serbia but aimed at a foreign market. The pay is crazy high, so high that if he accepts it, his family will be set for the rest of Peter's life. She says that the director will call him in a few days and gives him a stuffed bunny as a gift to Peter. All of a sudden, Miloš's brother Marko, who was watching the conversation from afar, joins them at the table to flirt with Layla and delivers some exposition to the audience, saying she's an adult film star who has fallen off and gotten into some heavy stuff after Miloš got married and stepped away from the industry. Marko offers to pay for the bill and leaves. That night, after Peter tells them he felt something weird while watching his dad's film and they put him to sleep, Miloš puts on a nice little film to watch with Maria before going to sleep, one of the productions he starred in. We learn Maria works as a translator and that Miloš is feeling pretty iffy about the proposition, questioning why they'd offer him big money after he took such a long pause in his career, and in Serbia of all places. Maria then laughs and jokes about how maybe they need an adult film star who has a diploma, letting us know that maybe Miloš didn't end up in this industry because he wasn't capable of doing anything else, but because he couldn't find a job anywhere else. Maria asks if he misses a job, and he says he misses the money he could use to escape the place they're in. She then starts kissing him and asks why he has never treated her like the girls in his films, and he says it's because he loves her. She then asks him if he never felt like treating her the way he treated the actresses and slaps him across the face. That sparks something raw in him, and they share an intense, intimate moment. We're then taken to the next day, where Miloš receives a call from Vukmir, the director, who calls him the Nikola Tesla of adult films and tells him a car will pick him up in 30 minutes for a meetup. When Miloš Milosh arrives, Vukmir keeps glazing him, calling him an artist, saying how much of a fan he is, etc. Vukmir explains that adult films are an art, but most people can't see it because they are a means to an end, a way for people who can't do the real thing to still find fulfillment somewhere else. He says most adult films are made by untalented people, but Milosh's performance is a proof that there is artistry in adult films. How Milosh is able to humiliate the women he acts with, reduce them to nothing, and then win them back afterwards. Vukmir then says, sadly, this is no country for real art. Where there is no life, there can't be real art. Milosh asks if there is something Vukmir has done that he could have seen, and Vukmir says he works for a select clientele, making films with real people in real situations having real intimate relations. A serious script and minimal editing where the production knows what's going on but the actors don't. Milosh asks what he will have to do, and Vukmir says the same as usual, get in front of the cameras and do the deed. Milosh says he's tired of getting in front of the cameras, but Vukmir basically says he should be more tired of being broke. Vukmir whips out a contract, says Milosh doesn't have to read it, red flag, just check the numbers and sign it. Milosh says he doesn't know what he's signing, what he's shooting, and Vukmir says he's not supposed to know, which yes, he is. He absolutely is. Even if you don't want him to know exactly what it is, give him a list of all the possible things that can happen so he's able to decide if he wants to go through it with it or not. Read your contracts, y'all. Anyways, Milosh doesn't agree right away, but he goes home, talks to Maria about it, telling her how much they plan to pay him, but that he refused the offer. Through this conversation, we learn that his brother is a bad cop and that he's better off financially than Milosh. He asks Maria if he should rent his assets to Vukmir, and she tells him to remember what he told her when she asked if he misses a job, essentially telling him to think about the money. And Milosh ends up signing the contract. We're taken through a montage of Milosh trying to get in shape for the role since he's a committed actor. All while his brother is back at his house with Maria and Peter. She's cooking and he's just making conversation, but we can tell he's very attracted to her, telling her how he wants a marriage like the one she has with Milosh. He then interrupts the conversation and excuses himself. He goes to the toilet to reflect by himself. Milosh meets an important looking guy when arriving at Vukmir's house a few days before starting to shoot. He tells Vukmir he's still uncomfortable not knowing what he's going to shoot, and Vukmir tells him to chill. Shooting day comes and again, a car comes to pick up Milosh. He is then given a near piece where Vukmir will be directing him through and steps out of the car only to find a guy with a camera filming him. Vukmir tells him through the earpiece to enter the building, relax. The building is an abandoned orphanage and there is another guy with a camera filming him as soon as he opens the door. He's walking down one of the orphanage's corridors when a woman opens the door and starts guiding him. She takes him to a flight of stairs where there is a teenage girl sitting at the bottom, leaning against the wall. The woman gestures towards the girl and the girl smiles at him. All of a sudden, a woman storms into the building saying she'd rather have impaled herself on a fence than given birth to the girl, grabbing her by the arm and dragging her out of the building while telling her she was warned about not letting the villains take her away. Later, he goes home. Maria asks how did the shoot go, and he says that they shot at an orphanage. Maria opens her eyes and asks him where, and the scene cuts to the next day of filming back in the orphanage. The woman who guided Milosh to the girl is fighting the girl's mom, basically saying that if she can't please a man, she can't be a good mother. The mother is then dragged away by two men and the girl stays in the orphanage with the guide woman who tends to her wound and takes her to her room. Then the guide woman comes back crying, hugs Milosh and takes him to a dark room where they share a kiss and she touches his private parts. Then two TVs in the room start playing scenes of the teenage girl doing random activities, and Milosh has to watch it while the woman kneels and performs an intimate act on him. There is a psychological game being played here, one that appeals to Milosh's fatherly instincts. That night, while alone at his house, Milosh calls Marco and asks him to do a background check on Vukmir since he's a cop. Marco agrees, and as he turns off the phone, we see he's on the receiving end of an intimate act while watching a home video of Milosh and Maria celebrating Peter's birthday. Then, after the video is over, one of Milosh's films starts playing and he starts talking to the woman he's with about Milosh's performance, questioning how he's so virile and not impotent like normal people. I think this might be a metaphor to something Vukmir mentions later, that Milosh might be the only one with agency in this story. We'll get to that. We cut back to Milosh's house and he's talking to Layla, asking her what exactly are they shooting. She tells him to trust Vukmir and his crew. He asks what she shot with them, and then we get a little more info on the heavy stuff Marco mentioned earlier when she mentions she does films with animals for art's sake. He asks if he's gonna do what she does and says he misses the certainty of knowing what he's going to film. She then offers herself to him for the billionth time in the film. He refuses and she says he's losing it. Maria and Peter were at a costume party and get back home. As they're talking, Peter hits him with a balloon. Flashes of random images briefly appear, and then, without warning, he's in the backseat of a car blindfolded. Miloš's blind comes off, and he sees he's in a dark room where the mother of the teenage girl in the orphanage is on her knees, being slapped and cussed at by a man. The man then leaves, and the woman slowly crawls her way to Miloš, who just watches, confused as hell. She starts performing an intimate act on him when he notices that the teenage girl is in the room, watching. He pushes the woman away and tells the crew he can't work like this. All of a sudden, a man sneaks up on him and the woman bites Miloš's private parts. She's biting really hard and the man tells him to hit her. And then the girl tells him to hit her. And both keep telling him to hit her until he does. He punches her in the face, but she keeps biting him. He then slaps her hard and she lets go, now using her hands to finish the intimate act she had started. After the act is done, Vukmir enters the room clapping, saying bravo. Miloš punches the guy that was holding him and storms out of the room, telling Vukmir he's not beating up women, especially in front of children or cameras. Vukmir then says a bunch of stuff to try to convince him that what they're doing is not so far from the kinds of films Miloš was already doing, and that he felt pleasure in those situations anyways. We're then taken to Marco, who has investigated Vukmir, whose name is Vukmir by the way. He gives us some exposition about Vukmir's past, saying he worked as a psychologist in orphanages until 1992 when he moved to the children's program of the state TV. At some point, he worked for the state security, was sent on a mission, and went off-grid in Japan, stating that if he has ever made movies, no one has seen them, which I think comes to no surprise considering Vukmir himself said that he works for a select clientele. Marco then goes on to say that Miloš has never worked with a more intelligent man, questioning who's more trustworthy than a child psychologist who worked for state security. I don't know, man. Anybody else? A child psychologist who now makes adult films where he has children watching intimate and violent acts taking place? Jesus. Anyways, we're back in the dark room where Miloš is now in his birthday suit, looking like that John Travolta meme. He turns around to see the girl's mother naked and motionless on the floor, apparently more physically injured than last time, with the man who held Miloš walking around her. Another guy walks in and motions for Miloš to move towards her, holding the same balloon Peter hit him with. Miloš turns the woman over with his foot and she seems fully unconscious until she opens her eyes and grabs his private parts. He then hears a child's voice singing behind him, "Hit it, Dad, tear it, Dad, Uncle Vukmir is shooting." And he turns around to see Peter singing it. Turns out it was a dream, or was it? And Miloš wakes up sweating on his bed. He kisses Maria and Peter and sees the car waiting for him outside yet again. Maria tells him that he can do it over the phone, but he says that he has to show up, hinting that he's going over to end things with Vukmir. He decides to drive there in his own car though. He gets to Vukmir's place and tells him he's retiring. Vukmir asks him if there's any way he can convince him otherwise, and he says no, stating that the kid in the kindergarten stuff bother him. Vukmir says, "Kindergarten, huh? That's a good term. God, I hate this man." He then starts screaming about how the whole country is a kindergarten, a bunch of kids discarded by their parents, which I think he's referring to Serbia's state after what happened during the 20th century. So what happened was, at the end of World War I, after Austria-Hungary was no longer a thing, the South Slavic peoples decided to unite into one country after centuries of being ruled by foreigners. So 6 republics came together, including Serbia, to become Yugoslavia, and it existed for the biggest chunk of the 20th century, from 1918 to 1992. Everything seemed pretty alright, given all that happened in the 20th century, and under the leadership of Josip Broz Tito, Yugoslavia was a relatively stable and independent socialist country that managed to have relationships with both the West and the Soviet Union. It was ethnically diverse, but it was united. Within this context, Serbia was the largest and most influential republic in Yugoslavia, with many Serbs seeing Yugoslavia as a form of protection and a platform through which they could assert influence. Being part of Yugoslavia provided Serbia with stability, security, and a sense of national identity within a larger federation. As this was taking place, the Soviet Union was the dominant force in the region, influencing or directly governing a lot of socialist states in Eastern Europe. Even though Yugoslavia wasn't officially under the USSR, they still had close ties, economic and political. But after Tito died in 1980, Yugoslavia started falling apart due to rising rising nationalism and ethnic tensions, which led to the Yugoslav War. When the Cold War ended, marked by the dissolution of the Soviet Union, a lot of socialist countries like Yugoslavia were highly impacted, because all of a sudden there was this shift toward capitalism and democracy. For Serbia, the fall of the USSR removed a powerful ally and symbol of communist/socialist solidarity. This, along with the fragility caused by the wars, left Serbia isolated, struggling to adjust to the changes. After the collapse of Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union, Serbia was left isolated and confused. It had been part of a larger federation and aligned with the communist bloc, but when all of that fell apart, Serbia lost the structure and support it relied on, like a child who just lost its parents. Now it had to find its place in a world dominated by Western capitalism and democracy. The Balkan Wars, along with sanctions and the switch from socialism to a market economy, wrecked Serbia's economy in the 90s. Hyperinflation, poverty, and unemployment were crazy high. To make things worse, Serbia was under the authoritarian rule of Slobodan Milosevic, who led the country into war crimes and faced international condemnation. Then, Serbia's attempt to assert itself, its aggressive nationalism, which included brutal campaigns like ethnic cleansing, was shut down hard by NATO during the Kosovo War in 1999. NATO bombed Serbia, and it was a major blow to the country's pride and power in the region. This was further strengthened when Western media supporting NATO's bombing of Serbia portrayed all Serbs as aggressors and compared Milosevic's nationalism to Nazism. The media focused on justifying NATO's role and overlooked the Serbian victims, fueling Western resentment toward the country. So not only were Serbia's parents gone, but its attempts to stand on its own 2 feet got crushed too. With its economical and political system in shambles, Serbia became easy prey for outside forces, basically people and corporations looking to exploit the country for their own profit without caring about the damage they leave behind. After Milosevic was overthrown in 2000, Serbia started its slow transition to democracy, but the impact of the wars and economic struggles were still there. Back to Vukmir, he says that this family that Miloš is so eager to leave is the backbone of the country's economy. Miloš then says he's insane and asks how does it all connect to the adult film industry, and Vukmir delivers one of those affected monologues about how it's all about life and art and whatever these insane directors tell themselves to justify their actions. Miloš says that he has no doubt it sells well, and Vukmir says a very interesting line. Victim sells Miloš. Victim is the priciest sell in this world, explaining how him, Miloš, and the entire country are victims. So with the context we have in hand, I think that when Vukmir says this family is the backbone of the country's economy, he's referring to the exploitation of the Serbian people by corrupt elites, as well as the country's economic vulnerability and the global capitalist system. The adult film industry in this metaphor is like the actual concept of exploitation. Serbia being used and dehumanized for profit, just like the adult film actors and by extension Miloš are being exploited for Vukmir's twisted art. The family is a society being violated and profited from by powerful individuals like Vukmir who represent exploitative systems. Actually, not even like Vukmir, but I think more Vukmir's clients. Vukmir, I think it's more of he's as much of a pawn in this game as Miloš is, but he's the enabler, so technically he has more control over how this goes. Anyways, that's where I think Vukmir's line, victim sells Miloš, victim is the priciest sell in the world, comes into play because it ties into the idea that Serbia has been commodified in its victimhood. The country, after years of war and suffering, is portrayed as something that can be bought and sold by external forces like capitalists, Western media, etc. Vukmir's art reflects this mentality, turning human suffering into a marketable product. In this context, Vukmir represents those who profit off of Serbia's trauma, whether they are foreign entities, corrupt leaders, or capitalists taking advantage of a broken system. Miloš, who is uncomfortable with the exploitation of children, a metaphor for the next generation of Serbia, wants to escape the cycle of mistreatment, but Vukmir insists that it's inevitable because this exploitation fuels the country's economy. Vukmir then illustrates his point by showing Miloš one of his films. The film starts with a naked pregnant woman on a table breathing heavily, implying she's about to give birth. A man dressed as a doctor comes in, checks in on her, and takes out his coat. The man tries to deliver the woman's baby, and we see that he's the same guy that always drives Miloš to Vukmir's house and to the shooting sites. But if Vukmir's business is so profitable and he pays his actors so well as he pays Miloš, then why did he make one of his actors work as a driver? Anyways, the film continues and we see the baby starting to come out of the woman. Mothers are warriors, you guys. Mothers are warriors. That shit looked so painful. Shout out to my mom. I'm so sorry. Miloš and Vukmir watch as the man successfully delivers the baby. The man then holds the baby with one hand, lowers his brief sleeps with the other and does exactly what you're thinking. Heartbreaking shit, to be honest. You can clearly tell the baby's fake, and you see it happening in a rather concealed way. You don't really see it. You kind of just you want it's enough to make you understand, but just the idea, it's horrible enough to break anyone's heart. Milosh storms out of the room, visibly distressed as any normal person, and Vukmir yells that this is a new genre called newborn corn films. Milosh drives away, but as he's driving, he notices his private parts are awake. He turns on the radio and a voice says it is the 18th of May. He stops at a traffic light, clearly not feeling well, when he sees a woman approaching his car, and he starts touching his private parts, doing motions. She stands outside his window and he starts touching her, almost like he has no control over himself, and she touches him. All of a sudden, flashes of random images appear once again, just like before, with Milosh's dream sequence mixing scenes we have and haven't seen before. The screen goes black, and once again, Milosh wakes up in his bed, but this time he looks slightly hurt and bloody. Realizing that most of the blood on his shirt and his bed aren't his, since he's not sustaining big injuries, he turns around to see the alarm clock say that it's the 21st of May, 3 days after his encounter with a woman in the car. Visibly confused, he starts looking for Maria and Peter around the house, but they're nowhere to be found. Milosh calls her, but her phone is still in the house. He tries to concentrate to remember what happened in those 3 days, but again, only flashes cross his mind. He tries to pee, and his pee is blood red. Gotta drink more water, my guy. Those kidney stones are no joke. He tries to concentrate, but again, only flashes. He leaves his house only to see the same car that drove him every day parked outside, but apparently no one's in it. He finds the key to the car in his pocket and starts driving while calling his own phone using Maria's phone with no success. He then calls his brother, but again, no success. Stopping at the last place he remembers being at, the traffic light, he remembers that after sharing mutual touches with the mysterious woman, she gets in the car with him and drives away. Milosh looks crazy. They share more intimate touches in the car and a flashback. Milosh then goes back to Vukmir's house to searching for answers. He looks around the house and can't find anyone, but the more he walks, the more he's greeted with flashing images. He walks into a room that has nothing but a bed and a blood-splattered framed engraving on the wall. When I tell you, I looked everywhere for the original engraving, I'm not even exaggerating. I managed to find a few screenshots referring back to the movie, suggesting that there's no real life counterpart and that the engraving is a prop, which in a movie so concerned with including historical and political themes, I wouldn't think that to be the case. I thought maybe it could represent some sort of council around the time the Serbian forces fought the Ottoman Empire or something, because the outfits and the art style, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just dumb and I can't find the original. Let me know if you find it. Anyways, it's in this room that Milosh gets another flashback, one where he walks into the room and Vukmir is there with the two guys we've seen before and a camera. Milosh walks in with a mysterious woman, I think it's the same guide woman from the orphanage, and again he looks crazy and he's handcuffed. Vukmir, like any annoying ass villain, says, "If only you knew how easy cattle aphrodisiac dilutes in whiskey." The whiskey thing was alluded to all throughout the movie, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned it, but Milosh drinks more and more as his experiences get more intense. So yeah, Vukmir gave him Viagra for bulls, more specifically, which is not very realistic, because a drug like Viagra alone wouldn't have that kind of effect, even if it's in high dosage, like what's implied when he says for bulls. So I think what he means is that the Viagra was mixed with some strong stimulants, hallucinogens, or other psychoactive substances, I don't know, which might lead to altered behavior or loss of control. That, paired with the psychological manipulation and the extreme stress of the situation, are probably what created this aggressive hypersexual version of Milosh. Vukmir, in fact, does mention it is a special recipe made by the mysterious woman, who we now know is a doctor. So yeah, the men bring the girl's mother into the room and handcuffed her to the bed. Milosh, drugged out of his mind, spots her and acts like Alex from Madagascar after a few days without meat. The doctor puts an earpiece in Milosh and frees him from the handcuffs. One of the men takes his clothes off and they release him onto the woman. They start to have an intense, intimate moment together when Vukmir starts to say through the earpiece that she's a horrible person, a drug addict who destroyed her daughter, the teenage girl, by letting the girl watch her have intimate relations with other drug addicts. Vukmir then tells Milosh to hit the woman and he starts to slap her very aggressively while continuing the intimate act with her. Bookmir riles Milosh up, saying she's one of the mothers who conceives babies irresponsibly, only to heartlessly throw them away, which makes Milosh punch her instead of slapping. Bookmir then tells him to imagine if she were Peter's mother, how she would turn him into something horrible, all while one of the men in the room places a machete on Milosh's hand. Bookmir screams for him to strike her, and he does, separating her head from the rest of her body, and not interrupting the intimate act for a second. The two men in the room come and remove Milosh from the act, and a flashback. Sober, real-time Milosh, upon remembering what happened, throws up and bites his own hand. He washes his face and continues his search through the house. He opens some cabinets, looking for any clues of what might have happened, and he finds multiple tapes with intimate body parts drawn on them, and a video camera on the table. He takes a tape labeled M and puts it in the camera and starts watching. The tape is a video of Layla acting sexy next to a donkey. He stops watching and takes another tape labeled with a drawing of a male private part. This one shows the footage where the woman bit his private parts earlier in the film, taking him to the conclusion that all the ones with the same label are about him. He takes them all and the camera and leaves the house. He drives to the middle of the woods and sits near a tree to very conveniently show us what happened in those 3 days. He skips through some footage and finds a moment where Vukmir is talking to someone on the phone, telling the person to not worry because Milosh will come to him. He skips again and finds footage of his own naked body lying on a wooden board where someone films one of Vukmir's men, the one Milosh punched, doing a non-consensual intimate act while Milosh seems out of himself. Another part of the footage shows the doctor applying an injection on Milosh. Another part shows Layla talking to Vukmir about how he had Milosh, but now, with the drugs, what he has is a body without a mind. That maybe if Vukmir had only heard Peter, he would be himself again. He would do whatever Vukmir wanted to make sure Peter was safe. Vukmir then says that fear is a downer and he needed Milosh to rise high, with the act to feel the ecstasy of a free act. Why anyone would be filming this other than for plot purposes, and how is Milosh watching these tapes in order, is anyone's guess. Anyways, Layla quits working for Vukmir and says she's taking Milosh with her. Next tape, we find Layla chained and bloodied and a bunch of her teeth laying next to a pair of pliers on the floor. They film her empty and bloody mouth, and a hooded man walks in, using Layla's toothless mouth to perform an intimate act. He then blocks her airways while performing the act, and Layla chokes and passes away. Milosh steps away for a second, trying to process what he just watched, but he has a flashback of a bloodied woman pointing a knife at him, telling him to stay away, and he goes back to watch the rest of the tapes. He finds a tape where he's sitting on a couch with a teenage girl and an old lady, which propels him into another flashback. The old lady is saying that God sent Milosh to deliver them from the woman, the girl's mother. May she rest in pieces. The lady says the woman was ashamed to their house, saying Raiko, the teenage girl's father, was a great warrior but had poor taste in women, stating that since his passing, their house has no men to govern it, which is why Milosh was sent. She states it's not only the house, but there is a daughter to take care of too, now that the girl is orphaned, calling her Alice in Wonderland, which, if you paid attention earlier, she's dressed as Alice when her mother is biting Milosh. I think that represents both the destruction of the girl's innocence being forced into a nightmarish world where she's treated as a commodity, echoing the generational trauma and the exploitation in post-war Serbia, and Milosh's descent into the depraved world Vukmir creates for him, much like Alice's fall down the rabbit hole into a strange, uncontrollable world. Just like Alice is disoriented and faced with bizarre, dangerous characters and situations, Milosh is drawn into a nightmarish scenario that he never fully understands or controls. Oh my god, I just realized something. Throughout the whole movie, there are like quite a few symbols of rabbits or bunnies. Like there are always plushies of rabbits, white rabbits somewhere. I think there's one in Vukmir's house. There's definitely one in the car that drives Milosh to the shooting sites and to Vukmir's house and all that. And Layla gives Milosh a white rabbit and she says it's for Peter. So that was one symbol that I hadn't cracked until now, that I hadn't like fully understood until now. And it's most likely referring to, the idea that Milosh is, is entering the rabbit hole and it's getting worse and worse. So yeah, I'm happy now. This parallel also emphasizes how both characters, Milosh and the young girl, I think her name's Yenka, are victims of larger destructive systems that overpower them, with Milosh representing the older generation entangled in violence and exploitation, while the girl symbolizes the younger generation already being pulled into this cycle. We can see that in play when the old lady says Raiko passed away as he was about to prove to the girl that he was not only a good father, but a good man too. You see where I'm going with this. The old lady says Milosh will have the honor of making the girl a woman, just like her late father did to her, like the old lady's late father did to her when she was a young girl. But Milosh, even though he was drugged out of his mind, manages to not do what was being asked of him. He goes over to the kitchen, grabs a knife, and used his private parts as hostage, saying that he will cut them off. Everyone in the set is shook, and Milosh uses a distraction to jump out of a window. After seeing this footage, Milosh gets in the car once again and starts driving. He drives for hours until he finds the house he fled from. He sees a teenage girl washing clothes outside and she takes notice of him. They stare at each other for a few seconds and she gets inside. Trying to recreate his steps, he remembers going inside a convenience store, stealing a bunch of payphone cards, and calling Marco to come pick him up. He walks some more and hides in an alley. While there, he sees two guys following a girl, saying bad things to her. The men mention she's underage and Milosh starts touching his private parts. The men see this and start stomping on Milosh. Two of Vukmir's men then show up and the bald guy, the one who is an actor but also a driver, unalives both of them. The girl that was being followed witnesses everything and runs away. The bald man starts undressing one of the guys, maybe to stage a crime scene, I guess. But Vukmir tells him no. He takes Milosh, puts him in the car, and drives off. And Vukmir tells Milosh he will provide him a fitting ending. They get to an undisclosed location where real-time Milosh managed to remember his way to and stands outside now. He walks in and finds a room where something bad seems to have happened, prompting him to have yet another flashback where the doctor applies another injection in him. She's preparing another syringe when Milosh grabs a syringe from her kit and hits her in the neck with it, pumping whatever was in it into the doctor, seemingly unaliving her in the process. Milosh stumbles out of the room trying to find an exit when he finds one of the security guards on the stairs. The man then takes a naked Milosh into another room, one where real-time Milosh walks into now and finds a brutal scene with unalive people lying on the floor. He looks around, seeing the bodies on the floor, and then we're taken to one more godforsaken flashback. Vukmir welcomes Milosh into the room, saying, "Welcome to a warm family home." Two motionless bodies are laying on the bed, one bigger, one smaller, but their faces are covered. He starts having an intimate act with the bigger body while Vukmir films everything. He then moves to the second, smaller body, and Vukmir smiles. The larger body starts moving on the bed, seemingly gaining consciousness, but another hand pins it back down on the bed. The hooded man from Layla's final video. He starts having an intimate act with the bigger body while Milosh is still with the smaller one. Milosh and the hooded men look at each other while Vukmir is having a blast. Vukmir then takes the hooded man's hood off to reveal Marco, Milosh's brother. He then goes on to remove the body's hoods off to reveal that the bigger body belongs to Maria while the smaller one, yeah. While a very drugged Milosh seems completely disturbed by the revelation, Marco doesn't seem drugged or bothered by anything, continuing the act while Milosh immediately stops. Vukmir calls them a real, happy Serbian family. Maria finally wakes up to see what happened, realizing Peter is foaming at the mouth and isn't moving. The doctor, who we assumed was unalive, actually wasn't. I thought the injection Milosh stabbed into her was the same thing she gave to Milosh's family to put them to sleep, considering she was foaming at the mouth and stopped moving. She shows up at the room, bloodied and distraught, not like Milosh had left her at all. Considering Vukmir and all his men were in the room filming Milosh, I initially assumed that Marco was doing very bad things to her before joining Milosh. She steps forward into the room and we can see she's carrying a bloody metal pipe, which leads us to believe that that was what she was using to hurt herself intimately. However, I read that she was shot up with the same thing she gave Milosh, the bull Viagra cocktail, which would then imply that she actually pleasured herself to death. I'm gonna give you some time to process that. They all keep watching her, trying to figure out her next move. She reaches out, trying to say something, but nothing comes out. She falls down to the floor, this time very unalive. Milosh takes the distraction as an opportunity to attack Vukmir, and all hell breaks loose. He takes Vukmir's head and hits it against the floor multiple times before Vukmir's men are able to stop him. Maria takes the opportunity to jump at Marco and bite him in the jugular, all while Vukmir's goofy ass is bleeding on the floor going, "That's cinema!" That's literally me all the time. eye, by the way. Maria takes a chunk out of Marco and he struggles heavily on the floor. Milos takes the gun from one of Vukmir's men and shoots both of them multiple times. The bald man comes at him, but he's able to shoot him too. Still, the bald man is standing straight and he comes at Milos trying to choke him. Milos tries to shoot him again, but he's out of bullets, so he resorts to punching him in the gut. Maria grabs a sculpture and hits it against Marco's head multiple times. Milos manages to overpower the bald guy, removing his glasses and revealing he doesn't have one of his eyes for some reason. Milos takes this an opportunity and pushes his private part into the bald man's non-existing eye. The sadness of him, giving us the film's poster, which I think that's exactly how the guy probably lost his eye. Stupid ass Vukmir is still on the floor saying that's cinema when he finally stops once and for all. Maria takes a knife out of one of Vukmir's men and holds to Milos, demanding him to not come close to her. He looks sad and heartbroken, but ultimately decides to punch her in the face, I think to get her unconscious. Milos takes the car and puts unconscious Maria and barely alive Peter in the backseat. Back at his house, he locks them in a room in the basement to keep them safe, I assume, and walks out, gun in hand, to unalive himself, but all he manages to do is to lay on his bed and black out, where he would wake up 628 flashbacks ago. Real-time Milos, after flashbacking his way through the film, breaks down crying in the room and uses a sculpture to hit Marco some more for, good measure. He then gets in the car yet again and drives back home, where Maria and Peter still are. He finds them awake, but still as battered and bruised and traumatized as ever. Milos goes over to them, Maria flinches, but he still hugs her. Milos cries as they share a moment in trauma, Peter looking completely dissociated. With the family now cleaned up, Milos watches as Maria sings to Peter. They look completely gone mentally, unable to sleep or do normal activities. Knowing they've reached a point of no return, Milos and Maria make a decision. They all lay together on bed one last time and hug each other. Milos has a gun to Maria's back. We're taken outside and a gunshot can be heard. Back inside, we see the family's bodies on the bed, laying in blood. We see the important looking guy, the one Milos saw leaving Vukmir's house earlier in the film, alongside two new security guards and a camera. The guy, who we assume is the new director, says, "Come on," and one of the security guards starts unzipping his pants, to which the director orders, "Start with a little one." And that's it. That's a Serbian film for you. I think extreme horror films are the perfect breeding ground for asking the hard questions. What kind of social, cultural, political, or economic structures need to be in place in order to allow this kind of violence to happen, Of course, there are many films who just happen to be exercises in makeup and visual effects, or are just self-indulgent, which isn't something inherently wrong, but understandably raises ethical questions to a lot of people. Still, most competent, disturbing films are able to lead the audience to reflect on philosophical and political extremes. If a system is built to favor exploitation, how morally responsible is the person who participates in it? If Milos was desperate, drugged, and put in a situation where only immoral acts are rewarded, how can he be held accountable? How is he not just a cog in the machine like everyone else, like Vukmir himself? One of the story's biggest triumphs is how it manages to make a sympathetic character out of Milos, and how his arc illustrates what the state of post-war Serbia creates of its people. All in all, I don't think this movie is nearly as bad in quality as people make it seem. I actually think it's a pretty solid film, and if we dismiss the lots of convenient plot points, I think all of the issues come down to just one thing. It's too much. And I don't mean it in the way of like, oh, it's too graphic, it's too intense. Like, no. I think how disturbing this film might come across is pretty subjective, especially for seasoned horror fans, but like, if you made it this far, you can probably tell there is a lot more to it than it seems. There's an important film here, one that discusses the painful history and culture of a country, all while bringing up themes of generational trauma, capitalism, exploitation, and the adult film industry. The problem is, all of that is buried under the violence, like when you put too much hot sauce on a chicken wing, or when you're at an amazing concert but you're too close to the speaker. Too much of anything ruins the experience. Like, I get it, it's supposed to be intense and transgressive, but while the violence is the very thing stopping audiences from being too complacent and indifferent to the extremes people under an economically oppressive system are put through, it is also the very thing barring people from appreciating or seeing the message at all.
It's funny to me that I pretty much got the point right at the end there, but I didn't really understand how that was kind of like the point of the whole thing. But yeah, the more I edited this video and the more I researched about Serbian history and about the filmmakers and stuff, I sort of came to the realization that the violence is the point. So I'm going to tell you in a minute that according to the writer and the director, there was a new wave of Serbian films that defined themselves through victimhood, through moral suffering made palatable. These were movies that turned trauma into a product, a kind of victimhood that could be safely exported. They offered a version of pain that was clean, reflective, repentant, a Serbia that looked safe for foreign audiences. Suffering became a brand, a performance of guilt that made Serbs appear introspective and civilized in the aftermath of war. But a Serbian film refuses that. It refuses to romanticize trauma or make violence digestible. It refuses to make horror pretty. What it shows is what other films aestheticize, the exploitation beneath the art. When people say the message gets lost in the violence, when I said the message gets lost in the violence, I was missing the point. The violence is the message. It's what exploitation feels like. If the film softened its edges, it would become the very thing it's criticizing, another sanitized export pretending to confront trauma while packaging it neatly for outsiders. Real trauma is not polite. It is not pretty. It doesn't arrive in metaphors or tasteful filters. It's messy, it's obscene, and it's unbearable. We condemn disturbing films for being disturbing, but what they really do is mirror our hypocrisy. We can watch endless real-world suffering online without blinking, wars, death, humiliation, but when a film reflects that same brutality back at us, we're certainly offended. Maybe it's not because the film is too violent. Maybe it's us who can't bear to see what we already accept every day. You know, it's when Vukmir says to Miloš, victim is the priciest cell in the world. And a Serbian film makes sure we finally understand the price. So back to what I was originally saying.
While I was researching about this film, I learned that the writer, Aleksandar Radvojević, said he took inspiration from the work of adult film star and filmmaker Roko Siffredi, who in the 90s made films where he engaged in violent intimate acts with local girls, most of the time Eastern European, all of which Radvojević described as having an uncomfortable undertone of colonialism, which led him to use sexual exploitation as a framing device for the state of modern-day Serbia. He and director Srđan Spasojević grew frustrated with the politically correct nature of Serbian films, which they felt were funded primarily to promote European Union improved narratives of tolerance and reconciliation in post-war Serbia. They viewed these films as shallow, focused on victimhood and Serb contrition rather than exploring genuine artistic expression. A Serbian film then became a parody of the politically correct Serbian film industry, critiquing how Serbian filmmakers were forced to align with external agendas in exchange for funding. That critique was supported by the fact that it was the first independently funded film ever made in Serbia, completely free of government interference. The extreme and disturbing elements of the film symbolically reflect how post-war Serbian society has been manipulated and exploited by foreign powers, with Miloš's brutal journey serving as a metaphor for the exploitation of both the individual and the nation. But because of this distracting, extreme nature, the message got lost. It pisses me off a little bit because I personally think the themes are pretty well constructed. I feel like the film hits all the right notes, but the graphic nature becomes so overwhelming that everything else takes a backseat. With that, I kind of understand the people who say this is an edgelord film with zero purpose, even though I don't agree with it. That's why I think, for example, Salo or Salo works better than a Serbian film because it feels more finely tuned. Even though both films are shocking, Salo works better because it feels more deliberate and thoughtful in the way it's executed. The disturbing parts have a clear philosophical and political purpose, making it easier to understand what Pasolini was trying to say. A Serbian film, on the other hand, while also politically motivated, often feels consumed by its own extremity, making it harder for viewers to engage with its deeper messages. So yeah, I like a Serbian film, and I really like Salo. Maybe I should explain it to you next.